Steve Harvey thought he had heard every possible answer in his years hosting Family Feud. But when one Indian woman in a stunning gold saree gave her response, the entire studio gasped, and Steve did something that left everyone speechless. What started as a simple question about first dates turned into a revelation that would challenge everything the audience thought they knew about love, marriage, and modern relationships. The Family Feud studio in Atlanta was buzzing with its usual energy. Two families faced off in what seemed like another typical episode. The Advani family from New Jersey stood at their podiums, their traditional Indian attire adding splashes of vibrant color to the studio. Across from them, the Thompson family from Texas wore matching blue shirts, ready for battle. But no one in that studio, not Steve Harvey, not the production crew, not even the audience members who'd seen hundreds of tapings, could have predicted what was about to unfold. When 26-year-old Kavya Advani stepped up to the podium, Kavya stood out immediately. Her traditional gold sari shimmered under the studio lights, intricate patterns woven through the fabric catching every camera angle. Her jewelry was breathtaking. From the delicate mahang tika adorning her forehead to the layers of gold necklaces cascading down her neck. Her nose ring connected to her earring with a delicate gold chain, and her arms were adorned with dozens of bangles that created soft musical sounds whenever she moved. Steve Harvey, never one to miss an opportunity for connection, immediately noticed her appearance. "Now that's what I call dressed up for Family Feud," Steve said with his characteristic charm. "You look absolutely beautiful, young lady. Tell me about this gorgeous outfit." Kavya smiled, her confidence evident despite the cameras. "Thank you, Steve. This is my wedding saree. I wanted to wear something that represents my culture and my journey." "Your wedding saree?" Steve's eyebrows raised. "How long you been married?" 2 years, Kavya replied, her bangles chiming as she adjusted her paloo. 2 years? Well, congratulations. You meet him in college? At work? Let me guess. One of those dating apps? The question seemed innocent enough. Standard small talk that Steve made with contestants to help them relax before the game. But something flickered across Kavya's face. A mix of amusement and something else. Something deeper. "Actually," Kavya said, her voice carrying clearly through the studio, "our families introduced us. It was an arranged marriage." The studio grew quieter. Steve's expression shifted from casual interest to genuine surprise. In all his years of hosting, meeting thousands of contestants from every background imaginable, this moment felt different. "An arranged marriage?" Steve repeated, making sure he heard correctly. "In this day and age? Help me understand this." Kavya nodded, her posture straightening with a mix of pride and determination. "It's more common than people think, Steve. Even here in America." Steve looked at the audience, then back at Kavya. "Well, we're going to come back to that, because I got about 100 questions. But right now, we got a game to play." The Advani family was already on the board with one strike. Kavya's cousin had just given an answer that didn't make the board, and now it was her turn. The pressure was on, but Kavya seemed remarkably composed, her hand resting lightly on the podium. Steve looked at his card, ready to move on with the game. "All right, Kavya, here we go. We surveyed 100 people. Top 6 answers on the board. Name something people do to prepare for a first date." The audience chuckled, anticipating the usual answers. Get dressed up, brush teeth, buy flowers, make reservations. Standard first date preparation that everyone could relate to. Steve was already preparing one of his signature looks, ready to react to whatever funny or unexpected answer might come. Kavya looked directly at Steve, then at the board, then back at Steve. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. When she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering. Google your arranged marriage match's entire family history, their education, their job, their horoscope compatibility, and check if any of your relatives know their relatives. The studio fell completely silent. Steve's mouth opened, but no words came out. He blinked several times, processing what he had just heard. The audience seemed frozen, unsure whether to laugh, gasp, or applaud. This wasn't just an unexpected answer. It was a window into a completely different world. "I'm sorry, what?" Steve finally managed, taking a step closer to Kavya. "Did you just say Google your arranged marriage match's entire family history?" Kavya nodded, her confidence never wavering. "That's what I did before meeting my husband for the first time." Steve looked at the board, then at the judges, then back at Kavya. That's not going to be up there." "I know," Kavya said with a gentle laugh. "But you asked what people do to prepare for a first date. That was my first date." The audience was starting to react now, a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and nervous laughter rippling through the crowd. Steve Harvey, the man who had a comeback for everything, seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Hold on," Steve said, raising his hand. "We need to stop right here because this is too important. You're telling me that before you met your husband, before your first date, you Googled his entire family?" "Not just me," Kavya clarified. "My parents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, everyone was involved. It's like a full FBI background check, but performed by Indian aunties." The audience burst into laughter, and even Steve couldn't help but smile. But his curiosity was clearly piqued. "So wait a minute," Steve continued, temporarily abandoning the game. "You're a young, beautiful, obviously intelligent woman living in America, and you chose to have an arranged marriage?" "I did," Kavya said simply. "Why?" Steve's question wasn't judgmental, just genuinely curious. "Help me understand this, because I think a lot of people here are wondering the same thing." Kavya took a breath, and something in her posture shifted. This was clearly a question she had answered many times before, but there was a patience in her response, a desire to bridge understanding between two different worlds. "Steve, when most Americans hear arranged marriage, they think of something from ancient times. They picture a young girl being forced to marry someone she's never met. But that's not what modern arranged marriage is, at least not in my experience." Steve leaned against his podium, giving her his full attention. The game show had transformed into something else entirely. A cultural exchange. A moment of real learning. "So tell us," Steve encouraged, "what is it really like?" "It's like having the world's most dedicated matchmaking service. Except the matchmakers are your parents, who have known you since birth," Kavya explained. "They know your values, your dreams, your personality, and they're not just looking for someone attractive or successful. They're looking for someone whose family values align with yours, whose life goals match yours, whose personality complements yours." "But don't you want to fall in love?" Steve asked, voicing what many in the audience were thinking. Kavya's smile widened. "Who says I didn't?" The audience made a collective sound of interest, leaning in to hear more. "See, that's the misconception," Kavya continued. "Arranged doesn't mean forced. When my parents suggested I meet Arjun, my husband, it was just that. A suggestion. They showed me his profile, told me about his family, his education, his work as a pediatric surgeon. I was interested, so I said yes to meeting him." "So it's like a blind date set up by your parents?" Steve clarified. "Exactly. But with a lot more background information." Kavya laughed. "And here's the thing people don't realize. We dated. We talked for hours. We went to coffee shops, restaurants, movies. We texted constantly. The only difference was that our families were involved from the beginning, and there was an understanding that if we liked each other, the end goal was marriage." Steve was fascinated. "How long did you date before deciding to get married?" 4 months, Kavya replied. "Which I know sounds fast by American standards. But when you go into it with the same values, the same life goals, and complete family support, you'd be surprised how quickly you know if it's right." 4 months? Steve's eyes widened. "I've had milk in my fridge longer than that." The audience erupted in laughter, and even Kavya couldn't help but giggle. "But here's what's beautiful about it, Steve," Kavya said once the laughter died down. "I didn't have to wonder if he was serious about commitment. I didn't have to guess if our families would get along. I didn't have to worry about whether he wanted kids or how he felt about taking care of aging parents. All of those big life questions were already answered before our first meeting. Steve nodded thoughtfully. So you're saying it's like dating with intention from day one? Exactly, Kavya confirmed. And there's something else people don't understand. The love in arranged marriages often grows over time. You start with compatibility, respect, and shared values. Love builds on that foundation. Do you love him now? Steve asked gently. Kavya's entire face transformed. The smile that spread across her features was radiant, reaching her eyes and lighting up her whole expression. More than I ever thought possible. He's my best friend, my partner, my everything. And the funny thing is, all those things my family checked before we met, they were right about every single one. The audience applauded spontaneously, touched by the genuine emotion in her voice. Steve shook his head in amazement. You know what? I've been doing this show for years, and this might be one of the most educational moments we've ever had. You're changing people's perspectives, right here, right now. Can I tell you the funniest part about our first date? Kavya asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Please do, Steve encouraged. So remember how I said everyone Googles the family? Well, my husband is American-born Indian, and his family is a bit more westernized. They didn't do as much research as my family did. So on our first date, I knew he was allergic to cashews, had won a science fair in 8th grade, his grandmother's maiden name, and that his cousin had recently opened a restaurant in Chicago. Steve's jaw dropped. You knew all that? Oh, that's nothing, Kavya continued. My aunt found his high school yearbook online. I knew he was voted most likely to become a doctor and that he played trumpet in the marching band. The audience was in stitches, and Steve was holding his sides laughing. So I'm sitting there at dinner, Kavya went on, trying not to let on that I know his entire life story, and he casually mentions he's allergic to nuts. I almost slipped and said, I know, specifically cashews, but caught myself just in time. Lord have mercy. Steve laughed. That's like showing up to a first date with a full FBI file. The Indian Auntie network is more efficient than the FBI, Steve, Kavya joked. They can find out information that doesn't even exist on the internet. Somehow my aunt knew that his family's neighbor's daughter went to school with his cousin. The connections they make are incredible. Steve wiped tears from his eyes from laughing so hard. So when did you tell him about all this reconnaissance? About 6 months after we got married, Kavya admitted. We were at a family gathering and my aunt let it slip that she knew about his peanut allergy before I did. The look on his face was priceless. He said, Is there anything about me you didn't know before we met? And I said, Well, I didn't know you snored. The studio erupted in laughter again, and Steve had to take a moment to compose himself. But here's what really shocked him, Kavya continued. When he realized how much research my family had done, instead of being creeped out, he was touched. He said, They did all that because they wanted to make sure you'd be happy and safe. And that's exactly what it was. Love expressed through investigation. Steve nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know what? That's actually beautiful when you put it that way. Your family was protecting you, making sure this man was worthy of you. Exactly, Kavya agreed. And now, his family does the same thing. When his sister was getting married, they called me to help investigate the guy. I've become part of the Auntie network myself. So you've gone from being investigated to being the investigator, Steve laughed. That's a promotion. The circle of life, Indian style, Kavya joked. Steve looked at the audience, many of whom were nodding and smiling, completely absorbed in Kavya's story. I have to ask, Steve said, what did your American friends think when you told them you were having an arranged marriage? Kavya rolled her eyes playfully. Oh, Steve, the reactions were incredible. My roommate from college literally staged an intervention. She sat me down with chai and chocolates and said, Blink twice if you're being forced into this. When I explained that I had full veto power and was actually excited about it, she didn't believe me. What convinced her? Steve asked. I showed her our text messages, Kavya said. Hundreds of them. We were talking constantly, sharing memes, having deep conversations about everything from philosophy to what we wanted to name our future dogs. She read through them and said, "This is literally how I text with guys from dating apps, except he actually seems serious about commitment." Future dogs? Steve picked up on that detail. You were already planning future dogs? Oh, Steve, Kavya laughed. By the end of the first week, we had planned our wedding colors, decided we wanted 3 kids, and agreed that we'd live near both sets of parents. When you're not playing games, and you're both looking for the same thing, it's amazing how quickly you can figure out if you're compatible. 3 kids already planned? Steve was amazed. Most couples don't even know if they want kids after dating for years. That's the beauty of the arranged marriage process, Kavya explained. All the deal breakers are discussed up front. Kids, career priorities, where to live, how to handle finances, religious practices, everything. It's like getting all the hard conversations out of the way so you can focus on actually falling in love. Steve turned to the audience. Y'all taking notes? Because this is actually making a lot of sense. Many audience members were nodding. Some even had their phones out, presumably texting friends about what they were witnessing. But wait, Steve said, turning back to Kavya. What if you had met him and just didn't feel it? What if there was no chemistry? Then I would have said no, Kavya said simply. And my parents would have said, okay, let's find someone else. That's what people don't understand. The arranged part is just the introduction. Everything after that is up to the 2 people involved. How many guys did you meet before Arjun? Steve asked. Kavya held up one finger. First one? Steve's eyebrows shot up. You married the first guy your parents introduced you to? I know, Kavya laughed. My parents still brag about their matchmaking skills. They're like, one shot, one perfect match. They've become legends in our community. Other parents call them for advice now. So they're professional matchmakers now? Steve joked. Honestly, they've considered it, Kavya said. My dad has a spreadsheet of eligible young people in our community. He updates it regularly with new graduations, job changes, and relationship status updates. He's like the Mark Zuckerberg of Indian matchmaking, except instead of Facebook, it's an Excel sheet. Steve clutched his chest dramatically. A spreadsheet? Your father has a matchmaking spreadsheet? Color-coded by profession, education level, and geographic location, Kavya confirmed. He's very proud of it. He even has formulas to calculate compatibility scores based on various factors. The audience was dying of laughter, and Steve had to sit down on the step of the stage. I can't. A spreadsheet. Steve wheezed between laughs. With formulas. He showed it to Arjun after we got engaged, Kavya continued. Arjun's a surgeon, so he appreciates data-driven decisions. He looked at it and said, Sir, this is incredible. What's my compatibility score? My dad pulled it up and said, 94%. Would have been 96, but you're allergic to cashews, and Kavya loves cashew chicken. Steve was wiping tears from his eyes again. Your father docked him 2% for a nut allergy? Every factor counts in the spreadsheet, Kavya said solemnly, then burst into giggles. So where is this husband of yours? Steve asked, looking around. Is he here? He's in the audience, Kavya said, waving toward the seats. Too shy to play, but he came to support. Where is he? Stand up. Let me see the 94% compatible man, Steve called out. A tall, handsome man in a well-fitted suit stood up in the third row, waving sheepishly. The audience applauded, and several people audibly awed at the sight of him. Oh, I see why you said yes after 4 months, Steve said appreciatively. That's a good-looking doctor right there. Arjun laughed and gave a small bow before sitting back down, clearly embarrassed by the attention. He's blushing, Kavya said affectionately. He's still getting used to my family's lack of filter. Last week, my aunt asked him when we're giving her grandnieces and nephews. We were at a restaurant. The waiter was standing right there. What did he say? Steve asked. He said, Auntie, we're working on it. But maybe we can discuss this when someone isn't trying to take our order? Kavya laughed. My aunt just turned to the waiter and said, You're young, you understand. They've been married 2 years already. Steve shook his head in amusement. Your family sounds like something else. They're intense, Kavya admitted. But it all comes from love. And honestly, having that much family support has made our marriage stronger. When we have disagreements, we have built-in mediators. When we need advice, we have dozens of people who've been married for decades, ready to help. It's like having a whole team dedicated to making sure your marriage succeeds. That's actually beautiful, Steve said sincerely. In American culture, we're so focused on independence that sometimes we forget the value of community support. Don't get me wrong, Kavya clarified. We have our boundaries. We don't let family make decisions for us. But knowing they're there, knowing they're invested in our happiness, it's incredibly comforting. Steve nodded thoughtfully. You know what you've done here today? You've completely changed how I think about arranged marriages. I came in with one idea, and you've shown me something completely different. That was my hope, Kavya said warmly. There are so many misconceptions about our culture, about how modern Indian families work. Yes, there are still places where arranged marriages are forced, and that's wrong. But for many of us, especially those of us raised with one foot in Indian culture and one in American culture, it's a beautiful blend of tradition and choice. How do you think your kids will meet their spouses? Steve asked. That's a great question, Kavya mused. Arjun and I have talked about this. We'll probably give them the option. If they want to date on their own, we'll support that. If they want us to introduce them to someone, we'll dust off Dad's spreadsheet and get to work. The spreadsheet lives on, Steve exclaimed. Oh, it's already been upgraded, Kavya said. My dad's talking about making an app. He wants to call it arranged.com, with the tagline, Where Families Swipe Right. Steve doubled over with laughter. Your father needs to patent that immediately. I'll tell him Steve Harvey endorsed it, Kavya joked. Steve suddenly remembered they were in the middle of a game. Oh, Lord, we're supposed to be playing Family Feud. I got so caught up in your story, I forgot we got a game going on. The audience laughed. Having been so engrossed in the conversation, they'd forgotten too. All right, Steve said, trying to regain his composure. Let's see what's on the board. You said Google your arranged marriage match's entire family history. Let's see if anyone else does deep background checks before a first date. Steve turned to the board with exaggerated hope. And of course, the big red X appeared with the buzzer sound. I'm shocked, Kavya said with fake surprise. You mean other people don't have their aunts investigate 3 generations of family history? Apparently not, Steve laughed. But you know what? I think they're missing out. Your way sounds a lot more thorough than swiping through some pictures and hoping for the best. Kavya's family ended up winning the game, though everyone agreed the real victory was the conversation that had unfolded. As the family said their goodbyes and the audience filed out, many people approached Kavya to thank her for sharing her story. But the impact of that episode went far beyond the studio walls. When the episode aired several weeks later, it immediately went viral. The clip of Kavya explaining modern arranged marriages was shared millions of times across social media platforms. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own experiences, both positive and negative, creating a global conversation about cultural differences in finding love. This completely changed my perspective on arranged marriages. Kavya's explanation makes so much sense. Why do we date strangers when our families know us best? The spreadsheet story had me dying. Her father is a legend. As someone in an arranged marriage, thank you, Kavya, for representing us so beautifully. The response was overwhelming. Podcast hosts reached out wanting to interview Kavya. Cultural organizations invited her to speak at events. Even dating apps started reaching out, curious about incorporating some aspects of the arranged marriage process into their algorithms. 3 months after the episode aired, Kavya appeared on Steve Harvey's daytime talk show for a follow-up interview. This time, Arjun joined her. "The response to your Family Feud appearance has been incredible," Steve said as they sat together on his couch. "How has your life changed?" "It's been surreal," Kavya admitted. "I never expected a game show appearance to turn into this. But if it helps people understand that love comes in many forms, that there's no one right way to find your partner, then I'm glad I shared our story." "And Arjun," Steve turned to her husband, "how do you feel about becoming the face of modern arranged marriage?" Arjun smiled, taking his wife's hand. "Honestly, I'm proud." Kavya articulated something that many of us have experienced but struggled to explain. The number of young Indian Americans who've reached out saying her words helped them talk to their own families about marriage has been incredible. "We even heard from non-Indian families who were inspired by the community support aspect," Kavya added. One mother from Iowa wrote saying she started a spreadsheet of nice young men for her daughter. She was joking, but also kind of not. Steve laughed. "Your father's spreadsheet is going global. He's thrilled," Kavya confirmed. "He's actually been consulting with a tech startup that wants to create an app combining traditional matchmaking with modern dating. They're calling it Wisdom, where experienced couples help match younger singles based on compatibility factors beyond just photos." "So your game show answer is literally changing the dating industry?" Steve marveled. "It's opened up conversations," Arjun said thoughtfully, "about how we've maybe swung too far toward disposable dating culture, about how involving family doesn't mean giving up autonomy, about how knowing what you want and being upfront about it isn't unromantic. It's actually the most romantic thing you can do." Steve nodded approvingly. "You two are wise beyond your years. How's married life treating you?" Kavya and Arjun exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "It's everything my parents promised and more," Kavya said. "Not perfect. No marriage is, but built on something solid. When you start with shared values, mutual respect, and family support, you can weather any storm." "And the love?" Steve asked, with a knowing smile. "Grows stronger every day," Arjun answered, looking at his wife with unmistakable adoration. "The arranged part got us in the same room. Everything after that, that's all us." The audience applauded, moved by the genuine affection between them. "Before we go," Steve said, "I have to know, did you ever tell him about all the pre-date research your family did?" Kavya laughed. "Oh, he knows everything now. He even helped my aunt investigate my cousin's potential match last month. He's fully integrated into the Auntie network." "I've embraced it," Arjun admitted, "though I did draw the line at creating my own spreadsheet. One in the family is enough." As the interview concluded, Steve made a prediction that would prove remarkably accurate. "Mark my words," he said. "Years from now, we're going to look back at this moment as when the conversation about modern love and marriage started changing. Kavya, you didn't just play Family Feud, you started a movement." And he was right. Kavya's appearance on Family Feud became a cultural touchstone, referenced in sociology papers, discussed in college courses on modern relationships, and cited by matchmaking services around the world. Dating apps began incorporating more detailed compatibility questionnaires. Some even added features allowing family members to create profiles for their loved ones. The phrase, "Auntie Network Approved," became a popular way to describe thoroughly vetted potential partners. Kavya herself became an accidental spokesperson for modern arranged marriages, writing a book called Love by Design: How Ancient Wisdom Meets Modern Romance. She traveled the country speaking at universities and cultural centers, always emphasizing that her way wasn't the only way or the right way, just one valid path among many. But perhaps the most beautiful outcome was the letters Kavya received from young people who had been struggling to bridge the gap between their family's traditions and their own desires. "You showed me how to honor my culture while still having choice. My parents and I watched your episode together. For the first time, we were able to talk openly about what we each wanted for my future. I was embarrassed about having an arranged marriage. Your confidence and joy made me proud of our tradition." Years later, when asked about the impact of that fateful Family Feud episode, Kavya would always return to one simple truth. "I just answered a question honestly. I had no idea it would resonate with so many people. But I think that's the power of authenticity. When you share your truth, no matter how different it might seem, you give others permission to share theirs too. Steve Harvey, for his part, often cited Kavya's appearance as one of his favorite moments in television. In all my years of hosting, that's the episode that taught me the most, he would say. Kavya didn't just change how I think about arranged marriages. She changed how I think about love, family, and the beautiful diversity of human relationships. The episode became required viewing in many cultural studies courses, a perfect example of how popular media can challenge stereotypes and build cross-cultural understanding. But for Kavya and Arjun, the fame was never the point. They continued building their life together, supported by both their families, proving every day that love arranged with wisdom and executed with choice could be just as powerful as any fairy tale romance. Sometimes, the most profound moments happen in the most unexpected places. A game show question about first date preparation led to a conversation that changed minds, opened hearts, and showed the world that love, in all its forms, is worth celebrating. And somewhere in New Jersey, Kavya's father continues updating his spreadsheet, now with a special notation next to his daughter's name. Perfect match found. Success rate, 100%.